Well, hey, like it's been mentioned, my name is David. I'm on the teaching team here, and I also have the privilege of being the site pastor of our Exeter location. Before we get into our conversation today, I just want to bring some really important, exciting news to you today. We are having our Vision Builders Gala on May 9th, which is in a few short weeks, and we're really excited about this event because this night is all around hearing stories of life transformation and hope and faith arising in people's lives from the people of Vitalpoint Church. And this next annual party and gala that we're having on May 9th is a special one because Ron, our lead pastor, he's actually going to be vision casting where we believe God is actually leading us for the next 10 years. You heard me correct, the next 10 years. And it's just amazing as we follow God and seek his face and his provision and his purposes for us as a church that plants churches in small towns. We are believing that God's going to do some amazing things over the next 10 years. So I want to encourage you to be part of that night. Maybe you got the invite from Ron in an email already, or you've been part of one in the past. I'd encourage you to be part of again, to hear the vision, to get the news about where God is leading us. And you can find tickets and register for the event on our website, vitalpointchurch.com, and know that it's a night where you can see how you can be part of more of an opportunity to contribute outside of just the regular giving, going above and beyond and being generous with your resources. I really hope you take the time to be there on May 9th. Let's get into our conversation today. And I want to open it up with a question. I love asking questions, and this one is a good one, and I had to mull it over myself. And the question is this: what difference can our life really make? Have you ever asked yourself that question? Recently, I've been asking myself as I've been raising kids, can these kids' lives really make a difference in this world? Can my life really make a difference in this world? And I think what happens when we ask this question is sometimes inside we want to burst and we want to scream at the top of our lungs. Absolutely, I do truly believe that my life can make a difference. But when we get to the depths of who we are, maybe we don't see ourselves in full light of how God has created us to be. He says in his word that he's created us to be image bearers of him, that he's knitted us together in our mother's wombs with a purpose and a plan, and that he has our life planned out, and we have to step into these moments. But sometimes we actually don't see ourselves in that true light or in true color of what God has called us to be in his world. And it sometimes maybe actually allows us to feel uneasy when we ask this question, can I make a difference? And some of the thought patterns that I think that get in the way of this, seeing this truth actually come alive in our lives, is because sometimes we look at ourselves and we compare ourselves to others. We say, well, I'm not as smart as that other person, or I'm not as talented, or I'm not as outgoing as other people who have a lot of influence. And what happens is when we compare ourselves to other people, it robs us of actually seeing our unique gifts or talents or the abilities that God has given us, because we're measuring ourselves up to other people and their highlight reels. You could say, like, you look at their social media or their perfect little family or whatever they have, and you're like, I'm not like them. And comparison robs us of the unique gifts that God has given us. Or maybe you've said to yourself, well, my story is a little too messy. We believe our story is too messy or too broken. Like my past disqualifies me. Like if they knew about my past or they knew what was going on in my life right now, the trauma, the mistakes, or the failures that I've had, it removes us from actually being useful to God. And the truth is that if you read God's word, his Bible, you see that he often uses a lot of brokenness to bring transformation in this world. Or maybe you say we equate ourselves and our influence with position and power, right? We think I'm not a leader, I'm not a boss, I don't have a platform, I'm not an influencer. And we think that the title and the platform is what you actually need, or you need a big following to make a difference. And then when you have those things, then you'll have influence. But often influence starts with faithfulness in small places. That's a truth that we need to hear today. Or maybe you said we feel unnoticed or invisible. I know I've said this one in my life. It's like no one sees me, or I'm not ever heard, or does anyone want to hear from me, or does anyone actually want to see me? And we don't think we can make a difference, or we don't have an impact because we've got to convince people of the things that we believe, or it just continues to spiral into lies inside of us that we're not noticed and we're invisible. And the truth is, influence often happens in quiet, still places over time. Or maybe you said, I'm just waiting for my big moment, and you overlook the small ones that God has placed in front of you. I'll make a difference one day is kind of this thing of just like, my life will change and then I'll make a difference. And we delay our purpose and we're missing opportunities that are right in front of us. Maybe it's a simple conversation with a friend or a boss or neighbor, or the kindness that you have inside of you, or the consistency of just showing up, or the service that you have, of the passion that you have. And you wait for the big moment and you miss all the little tiny ones. If you're wondering where these 5 things came from, the questions that I've been asking, or the thought process that get in the way of actually stepping into purpose, I found them in my very own journal. I'm a journaler. I try to do it every single day. And these are the consistent things that I battle with. And maybe they are the things that you battle with in your journal or in your prayers or in your thoughts. And what's crazy about these thought patterns or the routines that we fall into life, when they are starting to build up in our life, they can be at first subtle or quiet or still or maybe even faint. But when we don't face them or we don't walk through them with God, or we allow them to be just swept underneath the rug, they can ramp up. They can get bigger than what they were supposed to be. And they become actually the posture or the stumbling block of where we can't actually walk into life cycles, environments, and places and with a full life and full truth of what God desires us to do. It's crazy how it happens so fast. Maybe you're like, whoa, this is me right now. Or maybe you're like, that was me in the past, but I don't want it to happen ever again. We've just come out of Easter, and it was a beautiful celebration of Jesus' resurrection. And maybe you were brought by a friend and you encountered Jesus for the very first time and you gave your life to him. Or maybe you're here because you're not fully convinced yet and you still want to be curious and something's stirring inside of your heart and you want to continue and explore the truth of Jesus, of who he is. For the next 2 weeks, we're going to do this quick and dirty series called Game Changers. And I call it quick and dirty because it is really a series designed to inspire followers of Jesus or people who are stirring in faith a little bit right now to notice that they can have faith and levels of hope arise inside of them in the darkest moments of their life. And God does want to use you to be a game changer in your life and in your faith and bring hope to this world. Do you believe that your life can really make a difference? We're going to look at an incredible character of the life of Esther, an ordinary person, a young Jewish girl who was placed in the right time, in the right place, and made a lasting impact for God's people. And I want to say this, I truly believe that this can be your story as well. The big idea through this series, and we want to encourage you with, is this. You don't need to be someone else, you don't need to be somewhere else, and you don't need to do something else to be used by God. You just need to be faithful with where you are and what he has given you. That comes for the longtime follower of Jesus or the first-time person that's ever walked through a door of a church. It can be all of our story. And this is what God can do. He resurrects lives that don't seem to make any impact at all, but then he just changes the game through faith. So let's look at the story of Esther. I've kind of titled this conversation, Positioned for Purpose. And that's maybe just for me, but as we open up the story, I hope you see that she was positioned for purpose. And what may happen throughout this story as we open up Esther's life is you'll see maybe hints of maybe your story, maybe not exactly how it pans out in hers, but you'll see nuances or hints of where your story actually is in within hers. She was someone that did not have loads of influence. Let's just be real. She didn't have loads of anything, and not just materialistic consumption, but more in the sense of a cultural moment of influence. She was just a young Jewish girl that was part of a family that really had no significance at all in the world's eyes. But before Esther's ever introduced in the book of Esther, God is moving behind the scenes. We're taken to this place of Persia. That's where the setting of the story is. And Persia is this superpower kingdom of the day. And there's this king, and he's known for his wealth, and he's known for his ego, and he's known for excess and just consuming everything. And his army is the greatest of all. And in this moment, you'll start to see that God doesn't need perfect situations to do powerful things. He uses unexpected moments to prepare us for the influence of the kingdom here and now. In comes Mordecai and Esther within the story, and then they are a couple of underdog game changers. Mordecai is this Jewish guy living in exile in Persia, and his family was originally part of Israel, but they were taken captive of the people. And he's a good man, and he's actually got a lot of integrity. He's strong in responsibility, and he really cares about his faith in God. And he's an example of sometimes we feel stuck in a culture that maybe doesn't carry the same values of our home or our faith or our family, but he's living in this place where he needs to have faith and courage to arise in the moments that don't really have a lot of courage or a lot of faith. Esther and Mordecai are these beautiful realizations and realities that we have stories like them. Esther is Mordecai's youngest cousin, and she's actually an orphan who lost both of her parents, and he raises her as his own daughter. And her Jewish name is actually Hadassah, which means a symbol of peace and hope. But in Persia, she goes by Esther, and a Persian name that actually meant probably a star. Her name actually shows us the tension that she was living in with two worlds. She has this hidden Jewish roots of her faith and of her life, but then she's also got this visual Persian life with her new name of Esther. So Hadassah meaning peace and hope, and then her Persian life of Esther meaning star. And it got me thinking about just her name for a second, the reality of what you and I struggle with. Sometimes you and I, we will live in two worlds. We have our faith world or our faith life, and then we have our everyday life. But what often happens right now in the cultural moment that we live in is that we have to hide one or the other to actually succeed. Have you ever felt the tension of that? Like before I became a pastor and worked for a church, I was working in construction, and it was not a faith-based place. And I was on fire for my faith, but I had such a hard time of living it in the everyday. So I felt like I had to hide my faith so I could actually succeed in the ordinary, regular world. And maybe you and I, we struggle with these things. It's unfortunate, but it's so true in the culture that we live in. And Esther's name gives us the hints that she had a Jewish roots, but also a Persian life that she had to walk in every day, but she still had her faith. See, the book opens with a feast thrown by the king, and he loves himself. So this feast is all around him, who he is, what he can do. It's actually about 187 days long. And what's crazy about this is at the end of the 187 days, the king becomes a little bit tipsy. You got to think, after 187 days, you probably would become a little tipsy when you're all drunk and brought in by your ego. And at the end of the feast and at the end of the party, he calls for his wife, his queen, Vashti. And she sees the state that he is in. And she denies the request of coming to the king. And this infuriates him because no one says no to the king, right? But Vashti, she's like, no, like I'm not coming to you. So what happens in this moment is he actually banishes her from his kingdom and says, you will not be the queen anymore. I will find a new queen and she'll be even more beautiful. And this is the very first recorded Bachelor story. In the Bachelor show that people watch, I can't believe people watch it. It's so distasteful and such a odd way to seek marriage and life. And this is the first recorded one. I'm not trying to get off on The Bachelor, but I just can't believe people watch that show. But this is our first ever recorded Bachelor, okay? And he holds a beauty pageant for all the women to partake in. And I say that with tongue in cheek because this pageant was not voluntary. It wasn't like people heard like, oh, I want to be the queen. No, they were actually taken from their homes. These young girls who were beautiful because they grabbed just the beautiful women, they grabbed them from their homes, they were taken, and then they were given a year-long beauty treatments because one night they would be called upon the king to spend a night with him. And if they were chosen in that moment, they would have to please him. And if they did not please him the way that he wanted, they would be banished, and for the rest of their lives, they would be in isolation as forgotten concubines said, you had a chance, but you didn't get it. This is distasteful. If you're feeling something sour inside of your mouth, some scholars actually say this is a form of human trafficking. So it's disgusting. Esther is part of this process. And it says this about Esther. When the turn came from Esther, the daughter of Abihail, the uncle of Mordecai, who had taken her as his own daughter to go into the king, she asked for nothing except what Haggai, the king's eunuch, who had charge of the women, advised. Now, Esther was winning favor in the eyes of all who saw her. This is a hint to her beauty. She was a beautiful woman. And when Esther was taken to King Ahasuerus, into his royal palace in the 10th month, which is the month of Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign, the king loved Esther more than all the women. And she won grace and favor in his sight more than all of the virgins, so that he set the royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. Esther is taken into the system, and she's not just pleasing people by her beauty. We're starting to see there's nuances of her attitude and the wisdom of who she was. She didn't demand attention. She just listens. She trusts her adversary, Haggai, and lets her character in the moment shine, not just her appearance. See, what I've been learning through this, and maybe you've learned this, or maybe someone needs to hear this today, is that character often speaks louder than talents and looks. The talents and looks that you have can only go so far. Influence starts with how we carry ourselves and when we're not even in control. Often we think we need to have control to have influence. Often character shines a lot brighter in those moments when we don't have control. Esther, all throughout this, actually keeps her Jewish identity a secret. Her uncle Mordecai tells her, don't tell anyone about your Jewish roots. Keep that a secret. But she lives in these moments, in these dark moments, with humility and honor. And because she has faith in the Lord, has faith in God as the Heavenly Father, she has this bigger discernment and wisdom inside of her. Even in this dark, exploitative environment, God gives her favor. That's crazy to think. In this distasteful, gross kind of moment of a year-long process being groomed for the king, she has favor in God's eyes. I would say that even he had pleasure in this moment, that she was exactly where he needed her to be. And the king, in his earthly ways, is captivated by her. First by her beauty, but then by her spirit. And by her spirit and her discernment and wisdom and clarity that she has, he places the crown on her head. It's like the peace out, Queen Vashti. We don't need you anymore. You said no to me now. I've got Esther now. And in this moment, it looked like a train wreck. And even Esther being snagged up for some beauty pageant, it seems like a powerless situation. But it turned into God orchestrating and positioning Esther to be right in the right place, right at the right moment for the right move of God. A big takeaway here for us is this. Esther's story is not about royalty or position. It's about readiness. She didn't seek power. She walked faithfully through a pretty tough moment. Someone would probably describe it like this has got to be hell on earth. Taken from her only family. Yeah, she has lost her parents, but now she has lost Mordecai. But through this nasty and distasteful process, God opened the doors that she could never open up herself. Take a look at your life right now for a moment. The ordinary place that you call home, or the ordinary job that you go to every day, or the school that you just are frustrated with. This may be the perfect setting for influence that God has you in. Have you ever thought of that before? Whether it's your job, your home, your school, the circle of friends, God is already working behind the scenes. He's not waiting for you to become someone else to change the game. He's asking you to be faithful and ready right where you are. Right where you are. The story of Esther continues to progress. And if you get a chance to read chapter 3, it's a beautiful story. It progresses pretty bad, actually, but it's a beautiful story of God redeeming something terrible. The king actually decides to promote a guy named Haman and to a pretty high ranking within his world and his kingdom. And this surprised actually many because Mordecai, her uncle, actually saves the king. If you get a chance to read it, people were trying to kill the king, and Mordecai hears and tells the king, and then he's actually saves his life. But then in this moment of position and power, Mordecai's overlooked, and Haman actually becomes the most powerful guy within the kingdom. And he was part of a people group that actually didn't like Jews, and the Jews didn't like their people groups. And it's kind of this ancient rivalry that goes back and forth. And when the king ordered everyone to now bow down to Haman, Mordecai refuses. He's one of integrity and faith and resiliency to God. And it's not out of pride. It's out of his loyalty and his love for the Father and the Lord. And Haman actually takes this personally. He actually plots a way to wipe out all the Jewish people. And he actually tricks the king into believing that the Jews are the bad people. He doesn't name the Jews, but he starts describing who they are. And the king is like, no, we can't have this. But then Haman even sweetens the pot even more. And he says, I'll give you all of this money. And then the king's like, because I love money and I love consuming things. He goes, absolutely. He goes one step farther and actually gives him the royal ring, which you would stamp upon approvals of bills or new laws. And then now Haman has all of this power and he wants to destroy the Jewish people because of Mordecai not bowing down to him. He has now put in a law that all Jewish men and women, young and old, shall be executed and taken off this face of this earth. And this is an important information to know and have throughout the story, because in chapter 3, Esther's name is not mentioned once. It's not mentioned once, but we see that God has now placed the perfect person, maybe not in the world's eyes, but in his eyes, he's placed someone in that moment in the palace that can make a difference when something corrupt is happening behind the scenes. The stage is actually set for her influence. It looks impossible. The Jewish people, God's people, are about and are under threat of death and extinction. But God had quietly raised up someone on the inside. Esther was right where she needed to be. And through all of this story, her Jewish identity is still kept hidden. And the next chapters show how God uses her courage and her faith and her Jewish roots to change the game. This news actually gets back to Esther. And there's this moment of Uncle Mordecai and Esther having this conversation through messengers. And she's appalled. She can't believe that her family and her people will be wiped away. And they have this conversation, and it's captured for us in Esther chapter 4. It says, then Mordecai told them to reply to Esther, do not think to yourself that in the king's palace you will escape any more than all the other Jews. This is reality setting in. This is going to happen. For if you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another place, but you and your father's house will perish. And there's this beautiful line at the end, and who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this. This is an intense moment because the reality of death is on the doorstep of God's people, and another reality is sinking in for Esther is she cannot go to the king without being summoned. It's actually against the law. Remember Queen Vashti? She denied him. She didn't come when she was summoned. Now she's coming. Now Esther is taking this opportunity to, do I go to the king without being summoned with my personal agenda? I could actually lose my life. And Mordecai says to her, who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this to save God's people? She actually tells Mordecai, tell our people to pray and to fast for me, to have the strength to do what I need to do. She even says, if I perish, I perish. This isn't just bravery, friends. This is actually a surrender and accepting the moment of what God needs, not what she needs. This is the moment of stepping into God's divine purposes and plans for his kingdom to come. Esther did not volunteer for the spotlight. She was taken captive for this beauty pageant. She was selected to be queen, and years later, the moment comes where God says, I need you. She realizes that the placement is not random. It is full of purpose, and she is the one to be able to change the game for eternity. She's a powerful character within the scriptures that help us see that though the world may overlook us, oversee us, not think that we are powerful or have influence in this world, we are game changers because the Lord has chosen us. And he shines upon you, and he sings a melody over you because he says, you are my child. For my purposes, I have a life for you. If you get to read the story, and we're going to look more at it next week, you'll see that Esther gains the courage to go to the king, and everything changes because of her faith and her life and the hope that she has for God. You can read ahead and get the spoiler of what actually happens before next week, but I want to land with this kind of conversation with the end. Where has God placed you right now in your life to change the game? I'm being serious. Where has God placed you right now to change the game? Is it your workplace? Is it within your family that may be split in all different directions? Is it your neighborhood? Is it a friendship? You might not feel powerful or qualified. I'm part of that team as well. But God specializes in using people who feel unordinary, or ordinary, I should say. He specializes in it. He finds pleasure in it. And the key to understand this is faithfulness is the beginning of influence and qualification for God's purposes. Faithfulness in Him, capital H, Him, the great Lord, the Father of the universe. And maybe you don't feel qualified right now. You're thinking like, man, like I've lived a life. I'm still wrestling with these things. The Bible talks about the qualification of having faith in Him. You can find joy in these verses. Colossians chapter 1, verse 12 to 13, he says, give thanks to the Father. This is Paul writing to the church. Give thanks to the Father who has qualified you to share the inheritance of the saints in light. He has delivered us from the dominion of darkness and transferred us to the kingdom of his beloved Son. If that one doesn't work for you, I hope this one does. 1 Peter 2, verse 9 says, but you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for his own possessions. Talk about 4 mic drop moments saying, if you do not know, here are 4: chosen, priesthood, holy nation, people for his own possession. He goes on to say that you may proclaim the excellencies of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. These verses are the good news for a follower of Jesus or anyone who has the ears to hear truth and accept it for themselves. We aren't in a position to go in through this life on our own needs, our own wants, our own desires, our own strength to change the game how we want it. God doesn't desire us to say, hey, I can do this, Father. He rather a servant or a faithful follower of Jesus saying, God, may you take my weakness and make me strong. Can you take the things that I am broken in and shine your light through me so it can only bring you glory? And what happens is when this qualification finally just sinks in, not just from the head to the heart, there's this synergy between both. And then your soul and your strength, that you step into these moments, you start to see that the qualification comes from God, not from you, comes only through the death and resurrection of Jesus, who walked out of that tomb to give you life, not just life, but life abundantly. You bet your bottom dollar that the enemy of this world, he will try to steal, kill, and destroy every thought and every purpose that God has for you. He'll take you back to where my journal says you are not qualified enough. You are overseen. No one wants to listen to you. You compare yourself. You'll never get a break. There's always these little moments, but never your big moment. He will take you back to that moment. And here's the thing you need to know is that everything like that comes from the enemy's mouth or his ways of this world is a lie from the pit of hell. It is not the Father that loves you so much. It is a lie that Christ came to die for, to set you apart, to step into moments that changes his world so that more people can know who he is. Like Esther, she was chosen by God, overseen, overlooked. She was just this small little Jewish girl, an orphan, and her story completely changes history. Maybe your own story needs to shine a little brighter as well. Have faith in a God that can change the game through you. You may think that your life is not really significant. You may never leave your community, right? You may just stay in your small town or the same house, or you fill in the blank. You may never see yourself like allotting into anything. You may never get a platform or have the coolest gifts like other people you think, but that doesn't matter. What matters is you've been given exactly what you need from God, which is faith in him. If you feel like your story is kind of like Esther's, overseen, overlooked, will I ever get my moment? Think of a man named Ed Kimball. What's amazing about Ed Kimball is not much is known about him except for one thing. One thing. Is he taught a Sunday school class in a church in the city of Boston in 1854. And a teenage boy in this class was attending for only one reason, that he was kind of bribed into it because his uncle owned a shoe store, and his uncle said, if you want to work here and earn money here, you better go to church. So he attends this Sunday school class that Ed Kimball was teaching at faithfully. He questioned, is it actually working? Ed was actually burdened with this boy's salvation. And one day he goes down to the shoe store, and he summons up enough courage to put his hand on the boy's shoulder and say, hey, you need to give your life to Jesus. The way you're living is not a good life, but there is a good life in Christ. And even though in that moment he probably stumbled over his words like I do or you do in these moments of speaking about your faith, and we feel it's terrible, something happened. In that moment, the boy gave his life to Christ, and his name was Dwight L. Moody. Moody became a powerful evangelist. About 20 years later, a college student in Chicago called Wilbur Chapman received a salvation call in the service Moody preached at. As a result, Chapman himself became a well-known evangelist, and 20 years later, he trained up a young baseball player called Billy Sunday. Sunday became the most prominent evangelist in the nation in the 1920s. He went to Charlotte, North Carolina. He conducted a beautiful crusade preaching about the good news of Jesus, how his life had been transformed, and how people needed to come to know him and be given life through him. An organization of Christian businessmen actually was established at that crusade. And in 1934, they invited an evangelist called Mordecai Ham to conduct another crusade. And a young man who wasn't allowed to go to his church because he was called too worldly. Man, the church has a hard time with people coming in the doors. But he was perceived as too worldly, and he was then invited by a friend. If you can't go to church, you should come to this crusade. And he received Christ that night, because he encountered the living Jesus. His name was Billy Graham. And what's fascinating about that is that many people today who sit in churches often say that their grandparents or parents had gone to a Billy Graham crusade and heard the gospel for the very first time. Game changer. You may look at your life and think, all I could ever do is probably teach a Sunday school class. That's what Ed Kimball did. But his life changed the game by just stepping into the moment. Where do we go from here? I believe we have to begin to ask God for his perspective of our life. A transformation of actually seeing our lives with purpose because God loves us so deeply. Because here's the thing, you are a game changer as the stay-at-home mom who's raising the next generation. You're a game changer employee that works a dead-end 9-to-5 job, you may think. But at that 9-to-5 job, you're praying over your coworkers that they would encounter Christ. You're a game-changing teenager, Gen Z, that is maybe complained about online. And in this harsh world, you're actually loving and caring, and you're shining the light of Christ. You're a game changer as the senior who's been overlooked, and you're like the old person over there. We just keep them over there because that's what we do. But you're a game changer when you listen well and offer wisdom and become a spiritual father or a spiritual mother or grandparent to a younger person walking in faith. You are where he can use you right now. Don't allow the dream of another life to be the only place of impact. Saying, once I get over there, it'll be different, God, I promise. He says, I got you right where I need you to be. It's right where you are because of who he is. Don't waste the breath and the life that God has given you through Christ. Because when you are in Christ, we are made for more. Just like the Jewish girl, Hadassah, Esther, changed history.